Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Azevedo. Welcome to day 2 of BookFest, Author Day. Let me ask you something. What represents the face of publishing to you? In other words, what comes to mind if you were to boil down the publishing industry to a single representative element? What would that be? To some, it might be a logo, perhaps from one of the big five publishers. To others, it could be a major publishing hub, such as New York City or London. And still to others, it might be a huge bookstore, maybe Barnes and Noble to some, maybe Amazon to others. But to me, what the publishing industry boils down to is you, the author. You are the face of publishing. But what does the face of publishing look like? Well, it is the overwhelmed, exhausted single parent who just wants to get a few words written after the kids are put to bed. It's the retiree who's looking for a way to reinvent himself. It's the stressed out Generation Zer who doesn't want to believe that her life is now part of cubicle land in corporate America. It's the memoirist who doesn't want her family legacy forgotten. As authors, each of you have something. That's not quite right. Each of you are something that's bigger and more important than any major publishing entity, and that is your humanity. Beyond your storytelling talents, your individuality is your greatest asset. Readers, they're not looking to connect with a logo, they're looking to connect with you. They don't care who published the book, they care about you, the author. No publisher, marketer, bookstore, distributor, or fancy tool has that superpower. That superpower is yours alone. The ability to create sustained reader connection and interact with readers beyond the book is the holy grail of this industry. And if you're an author, you must respect, adore, cherish your readers, and lean into your reader community as if your author life depends on it, because it does. Now, I realize some of you may be newer to this industry and you're watching and you may say, well, Jim, I haven't even published my first book yet. How could I be the face of publishing? I'll tell you how. You're here. You showed up. You're at an industry event that was made for you to help you succeed. And you know what? Now you are part of this wonderful tribe. So I just want to let you know, authors, especially those of you who are newer, you belong here. So let me be among the first to say, welcome. Now, has it always been like this with the power setter of the publishing industry revolving around authors and authors being the face of publishing? Well, not really, because for generations, the largest traditional publishers controlled the industry. It was a print centric industry up until about just 15 years ago. And frankly, thank goodness that the largest traditional publishers controlled the industry because without them, we would not have been exposed to all of the beautiful, wonderful books that have influenced culture and enhanced our lives for all of these generations. And the publishers were and still are exceptional at what they do because what they can do is they can take a good book and turn that good book into a great one. But for generations, again, a relatively small amount of people were the ones who decided which manuscripts would graduate to become published books and where those books would be sold. Now, remember, it was a print-centric industry going back to just about 15 years ago. And because physical books are expensive to produce and to distribute, they're kind of heavy. Publishers couldn't say yes to publishing every single manuscript or every single author that came into their offices. So most manuscripts and authors were turned down. And let me just say, publishers aren't to blame. It is an impossible task for publishers to say yes to everyone. So, again, this had been going on for generations, and legions of authors had been turned down, so something had to give. Something did. A sea change event hit the industry circa 2007 and between 2007 and 2009 when the first viable e-reading devices began to hit the market. Digital self-publishing and distribution tools began to make their debut, and surprisingly, at least at the time, global online retailers began to say yes to ebooks from self-published authors. What do you think happened when writers were given the freedom, the knowledge, and the tools to self-publish? Right. The indie author revolution was born. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the term indie is just slang for independent or self-published. The indie author revolution, let me just go out on a limb here. The indie author revolution is not some passing fad because during the past 14 and now 15 years, the indie author revolution has become a global cultural phenomenon that has unleashed a wave of diversity into this industry. And I can tell you that it has been my honor to watch this revolution evolve because in less than 2 decades, self publishing has evolved from a revolution to a movement to a community, and now it has morphed into a culture all of its own. Now, the indie author revolution was ignited with publishing's digital transformation. Again, this is around 2007 to 2008 when the entire industry became democratized. Pioneering authors were the first to take matters into their own hands, whether they were self publishing for the very first time or some of those authors in the very beginning were professional, traditionally published authors who had their rights reverted back to them. And now they were self publishing some of their backlist titles as self published titles, sort of breathing new life into their older books. Now, the revolution evolved into a movement when more and more authors noticed what was happening out there. What began as a trickle of pioneering authors soon became a torrent as more and more authors learned that they could publish faster, distribute globally, retain their rights and creative control, and keep the lion's share of their royalties. As authors began to experiment with their newfound freedom and control, marketing tactics began to change, and indies began to find themselves on all the bestseller lists. This began first at the retailers, and then indie authors began finding their books at bestseller lists at traditional media, such as USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. Once ashamed to admit their work was self published, today indie authors have collectively obliterated the self publishing stigma. Now, out of the indie author movement, a global indie author community has blossomed. This community has occurred organically as the growing movement necessitated an entire ecosystem to support it. This includes publishing and distribution platforms and other service providers, freelance editors, professional marketers, professional cover designers, and it hasn't stopped there. Now there are international conferences, magazines, writers clubs, and even advocacy groups that are all dedicated to the indie author community. And guess what? It still hasn't stopped. What has evolved from the indie community is the most beautiful transformation yet, and you are all part of it. Culture. Notice how I didn't say indie author culture. That's because indie culture has become a shared ideology, not just among indie authors, it's shared among authors, publishers, service providers, and even readers. It's even transcended across both indie and traditional publishing worlds. You might be asking yourself, Jim, that sounds great, but I'm just here to figure out what the right path is for me. Is it indie publishing? Is it traditional publishing? Is it hybrid publishing? What's the right path for me? And the answer is Yes, because the trick is just keep digging. You need to discover what the right path is for you. All of these paths are viable, and you might find yourself trying each one of them, traditional, hybrid, and indie, as you go throughout your author career. Now, indie is hands down the best path for some, but not for everybody. And the same can be said for traditional and hybrid models as well. The takeaway here is not if your book will be published, but when and how. And you, as authors, get to say exactly that, when and how my book gets to graduate from manuscript to published novel. So, back to the indie author ideology, of which I spoke of just a moment ago. What is the ideology of indie culture? The ideology is this: it's that we are all in this together with a shared mission of raising up each and every one of our voices, regardless of background, color, religion, sexual orientation, or any other societal label. We are all here to help each other succeed. We are all here to learn from each other. And we are all here to teach each other. In this tribe, we all belong. In this tribe, we are all the face of publishing. Thank you.